Alexandra and her adopted son passed into Tibetan territory and met the Panchen Lama in Sigaste in August 1916. At that time, Sikkim was a British protectorate. When British authorities learned of their presence in Tibet, Alexandra and her adopted son were forced to leave the country. In 1916, they were unable to return to Alexandra's home because Europe was in the middle of World War I. Instead, they traveled to Japan. In Japan, Alexandra met Ikai Kawaguchi, who had visited Lhasa in 1901. He had crossed the border disguised as a Chinese doctor. This inspired Alexandra to visit Lhasa with her adopted son, disguised as pilgrims. After crossing China from east to west, they reached Lhasa in 1924 and spent 2 months there. In 1928, Alexandra legally separated from Philippe, but they continued to exchange letters, and he kept supporting her until his death in 1941. In her later life, Alexandra settled in Digne, in Provence in France. During the next 9 years, she wrote books. In 1929, she published her most famous and beloved work, Magic and Mystery in Tibet. In 1937, Yongden and Alexandra went to Tibet through the former Soviet Union. This was during the Second World War. They eventually ended up in Tashinlu, where Alexandra continued her investigations of Tibetan sacred literature. While in eastern Tibet, Alexandra and Yongden completed circumambulation of the holy mountain Amnai Machen. The pair returned to France in 1946. Alexandra was then 78 years old. In 1955, Alexandra's adopted son Yongden died at the age of 56. Alexandra continued to study and write at her home in Digne, in France, till her death at the age of nearly 101 years old. According to her last will and testament, her ashes and those of her adopted son Yongden were mixed together and dispersed in the Ganges River in 1973.